Okay, so for those of you just arriving, hello, hello, and welcome. I just want to ask you something, and I want you to just take a moment, close your eyes, come into your body, and just check in with yourself. Have you ever looked at your life and thought, why do I feel disconnected from myself? Just think about that. Maybe life looks okay from the outside. You're leading and functioning well at work, while building, while handling things, while you're with your family. But inside, you are feeling exhausted, maybe unfulfilled, restless, disconnected. These are all feelings that can come about. And when we feel this way, the mind may say, I need to find my purpose, or I need clarity. That's a big one that I've used myself. Or I don't know who I am anymore. Now just way to think about that. Are you going through it right now? Have you gone through it in the past? And what if the question I have for you is, what if you're not actually lost? What if you've just been living in survival mode for so long that you can no longer hear your own clarity? Just considering that. Because the truth is that a lot of people will come to me and they'll talk and they'll say, I feel lost in my world. Like my work is good, I'm good at doing my work, but it just doesn't feel fulfilling anymore. Or it might even be within home, within friendships, within the family, the one you're birthed into, as opposed to the one you've chosen. So a lot of the times what actually is happening to us is that we're not lost, but what we are is overstimulated, overcommitted, overperforming, and disconnected from our stillness. And this is a life that I lived for a long time. So the piece that I want you to hear on this is that you can't hear your truth clearly if we're in chronic internal noise. So think about that. If the mind is always running and it's always chattering, if we are always trying to please everybody else and fulfill things, um, if we are not checking in with our own internal voice and getting those cues before we respond to somebody. So in other words, somebody asks us, oh, can you help me with this? Did we check in and make sure that our yes was a hell yes? Or if it was a no, did we follow through or did we override ourselves? And so it is the ignoring our own internal voice, that voice of, you might call it your intuition, that inner whisper, your soul, your spirit. If we're not listening to that, we're overriding it for external reasons, wanting to have a sense of safety, security, belonging, and love in our outer world, then this is what will start to happen to us. So I just want you to take those moments and just think about that. So for myself, where I really felt this was in my work prior to getting hurt, where I was like, oh, I need to find a new career. I need to make a big change, because my life looked good on the outside, but I felt lost on the inside. I had all the things I had ever wanted and the things I was told that I would ever want, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was feeling pulled in way too many directions. And it was getting to a point where here I had the family I'd always dreamed of having, and I had no time for them. I was sitting on boards for my son's sailing team and sitting on a board for work, for uh, like a networking group. I was sitting on all these boards and doing all these things, and yet I wasn't actually getting true connection. I didn't feel like I had true connection with my kids. I didn't feel like I had true connection with my husband. And then it started to feel like, because I wasn't looking at myself and my own habits, I was assuming that it was work that was pulling me away from them. And it was actually how I was showing up at work that was actually pulling me away from them, or how I was showing up in life. This subconscious desire to be a super mom, to be all the things that I felt I didn't have when I was growing up, to be, the perfect wife, to be a perfect leader and employee. So all these desires to be perfect in an unconscious need to feel like I had security and that I belonged and that I was loved. This desire to have those things was causing me to perform instead of be present. And that is a really big distinction that I want to leave with you. So are we performing or are we being present? Because often they're not the same thing. So think about this for a moment as we go into it. So our purpose is what I wrote down. So, our nervous system. So when I look back and I go into my nervous system and I realize that what was really happening was my nervous system was on high alert. I was always on. I never rested. I didn't feel like it was safe to rest. If I was taking downtime, I had to be doing something. Hello, Bobby. These were all things that I was pushing and forcing. And when I was stressed and I was in this situation where I had all this beauty in my life, but I was stressed. So all I was doing was narrowing my perception to look for the problem, as opposed to softening and making space where I could see solutions or I could expand and open to clarity. And our body, it focuses on urgency, not meaning. And I did not realize this at the time. I didn't realize that what was happening is mentally, emotionally, and physically, I was completely focused on urgency, on what was the next thing that I had to do. I was juggling being a mom, being a wife, being a leader, running a business, all these different balls in the air. And so my body is so focused, don't drop a ball, don't drop a ball, that I wasn't realizing that I had already fallen. I was not even one of the balls I was juggling. I was juggling everybody and everything else, but I wasn't breathing. I didn't even know who Don was anymore, and I was getting very lost in that. And it wasn't a business situation or a marriage situation or a family situation. It was a me situation. And so once we start to come into a state of space, of stillness, then we can start to hear that voice again. We always think of our purpose is outside of ourselves. My purpose is, say, to be a coach. And I struggled with this for a long time. In the very beginning of coaching, I assumed I would actually do identity coaching, which I guess in many ways I actually do, which is different than what I thought it would be. I assumed it was the identities of being a human. I am a survivor. I am previously, I was a mom, I was a wife, I was a lighting guru. These were the roles that I played, and I thought that they were purpose. And we don't realize that our purpose is so much bigger. And so, as we look through this, we look at purpose often as an external thing. And the key though is it never ever shows itself, or at least very rarely shows itself through pressure. It emerges through coherence. And it was only once I started to create some coherence for myself that I was able to start understanding what those whispers meant. Because if you've ever gotten kind of a hit, a download, a premonition, they can be kind of ambiguous. You're like, what does that mean? What type of a coach am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? And I was hearing the same answer over and over again, even from my spiritual director, from mediums, from all sorts of people. And they're like, you're supposed to be coaching. But that's a really broad statement. And it would take me close to 8 years to figure out what that actually meant. Well, 10 years from when I really started that portion of my life. And so, when we look at things often as, the identities, the achiever, the caretaker, the fixer, the survivor, the people pleaser, all of these pieces that we can live from, but none of that's really our truth. And our purpose is linked to our truth. Those are all adaptations that we make to be in this world. Realizing this last little while of, what is our purpose and how do we understand it? So from a spiritual point of view, so for those of you that don't know, I'm a certified spiritual director, and I have taken 3 different certifications in coaching, all because I had a true desire to figure things out. I thought like I would finally kind of figure out what's my purpose, what direction am I supposed to be going in. And as I was going through this journey of healing my own life and stepping forward, the very first thing that I became aware of was that there is a difference between our extrinsic purpose, so the purpose out here, and our intrinsic purposes. And so there's three that we each have. And the first purpose is intrinsic, and it's actually the most important. It is the most vital, although we tend to, as humans, jump to the third. Because we'll usually come into our physical human form first, not realizing that the depth of the third purpose comes from the first purpose, and then the second. So the first purpose is to know thyself, which means to start to recognize and explore and understand that you are a divine creature. You are divine. You are an aspect of Source, Universe, Spirit, God. And that is the first intrinsic purpose, is to remember that you are so much more than a physical body, a mind, emotions, behaviors, experiences. You're the one that is capable of experiencing all of that. So that's the first purpose, to remember and know who you are. And who you are is a divine being. The second intrinsic purpose is to help others do the same. Well, sorry, I'm going to change that slightly. The second actually is to fully embody it. So to fully embody it, and in that way, when we fully embody our divinity, we help others do the same. So we help other people realize their pure potential. Then we can shift to the third. And the third purpose, everybody thinks is a job, and it's not. It's actually a lot deeper than that. It's the ability to understand that it's how we show up, and it becomes what we do. So there's who you are, and then there's what you are. And what you do needs to be in service. And so what happens for most of us is what we do tends to be in service to what we are. What I mean by that is, instead of being in service to the fact that I'm a divine spirit, I act in service to my ego or my identity, which is, mom, wife, survivor, business owner, coach, speaker, author. Everything I do would be in service to that, to those identities, to my ego. And my ego is always built on my past, not just my dreams. And so if I am in service to the past, can I be present? It's a lot harder. But if we're in service, if what we do supports who we are, then we are now acting in service with our higher self. Now we are seeking a different type of guidance, and we create space and stillness to get the answers, the clarity that we so deeply desire. And that's what we're talking about here today. So on this journey, it has been a fascination. So most of you know, I started my coaching journey. I originally was doing identity crisis, helping people kind of figure out, issues. And I was just kind of a generic coach. My original coaching was in leadership. So I worked with John Maxwell for several years, did his mentorship programs, specifically looking at doing leadership coaching, teaching, and speaking. Then I went to Erickson and went far more into a generic life coaching. But I loved their pillar of everybody's doing, always acting from a positive intention, even if it's harm. There's always a positive intention. So when we can understand the intention, then we can change behaviors. Loved it. Then my last training, so after that I did meditation training, yoga training, breathwork training, all kind of compiling and figuring out more about myself and my ability to heal. Then I took my training in emotion code and body code, so added in the energetic healing aspect of things, did my shamanic training, and then also did my third coaching, which was with Quantum University and becoming a quantum holistic coach. And so I tell you all of this because it was not realizing what I was really trying to do was feel like I belonged. I needed to feel like I had enough tools, like I was relevant, that I was worthy of the role that I was playing. And so those were things that I did to help my own heal my insecurities and help my own sense of self, of being good enough. When I started coming into this, during all of this, I was doing a deep, deep spiritual practice of the surrender experiment. And so a lot of these things came to me as I was learning, and I would get these little pieces that were really, really powerful. So egoically, I was doing them for one reason, but from a soul point of view, it was very different. I was gaining a deeper understanding through all of that to answer the question, who am I? And it was only doing all of that work that I came to the deep understanding of who I am. So then as it carries on, somebody brought to me through acupuncture the 5 elements. You've probably heard me talk about them before. And I became fascinated because the 5 elements have been around through humanity. They've been written about for over 3,000 years. And they have been depicted through artwork, I think it's 7,000 years now. And so they've been around a long time. And not only are they the elements that create everything, but they're also psychology. They also handle biology. And so they completely explain what we call psychoneuroimmunology. So how the mind, body, emotion, spirit all work together to create. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And the more I got to know it, the more I got to know not only who am I, but I understood the basis of what am I, not just from my past, but the actual choice of what I came here to experience and do. And so that's the part I'm going to share. So now I'll track back over to the part I want to read to you guys. So, how I wrote it was this. So, ancient Taoist wisdom understood that people adapt differently under stress. Some people push relentlessly, always striving, always forcing, and always trying to prove themselves. That's often wood out of balance, pressure, frustration, and urgency. This was me. Some overthink and over caretake, taking responsibility for everyone while abandoning themselves. That's often earth imbalance, worry, emotional heaviness, and depletion. Some become scattered and overstimulated, always moving, reacting, chasing the next thing. That can reflect a fire imbalance, restlessness, and a lack of grounding. Some become rigid, perfectionistic, overly controlling, trying to create safety through certainty. That often reflects mental imbalance, self-criticism, grief, and perfectionism. And some collapse into fear, hesitation, or exhaustion. And that can reflect water imbalance, fear, depletion, nervous system fatigue. Different patterns, same truth. The system adapted to survive. The goal is not becoming someone else. The goal is becoming aware enough to stop abandoning yourself. I just want you to consider how often we abandon. Every one of those elements has an abandoning habit. We have a controlling habit, we have a stress response, and we have a habit of abandonment. And we abandon for different reasons. And so then what starts to happen is we've abandoned ourselves. We think, oh, I need to find my purpose. And what we're really saying is, I need to find me again. Who am I? What lights me up? What brings me joy? What would fulfill me right now? Not just a sense of doing, but a sense of being. Is it being with a group of friends that make you laugh and joyful? For some people, yes. For others, it's a quiet walk with only one other person. For some, it's a big dinner party, and for others, it's just with one other couple. And so when we can start to explore what actually fills me up, not what would please everybody else or what would look right, or I don't want to offend people. So what would be in my best interest, not just everybody else's, but me included. It's not about being selfish. It's about how can I do what's in the greatest good of the whole. And when we're working in the greatest good of the whole, you're always there. You're part of that whole. And so it's a powerful thing to consider. It's not doing things for others or doing something for ourselves. It's, can I stand in my own truth and be of service to the whole of humanity, which includes me? And when I'm in that service, then what I'm doing, no matter what it is in service to who I am instead of what I am. And so the more service I have there, the more that I'm always going to be walking in true purpose, intrinsic as well as extrinsic. So given a practice here, I just want you to take a moment and just close your eyes or soften your gaze, whatever feels right for you. And I just want you to come into your body and come into your breath. Maybe you take your hands, place them on your low abdomen. In Taoist science, we would call this the dantian, so the power center of the body. And just breathe really slowly into your pelvis, starting to slow the breath down. Inhaling, and maybe you sigh the breath out. Breathing in. Sigh the breath out, slowing it down even more. And now just ask yourself, where in my life do I feel the most disconnected right now? Where in my life do I feel the most disconnected right now? So just close your eyes, feel into your body, hands on that low abdomen. Where in my life do I feel the most disconnected right now? Is it work? Relationships? Could be romantic, or friendships, could be family. How about my body? My purpose? How about your joy? And now ask, so just let that settle in, what mode have I been living in? Is it pressure, fear, overgiving, control, survival? And just notice. Just feel into that. And now ask, when do I feel the most like myself? Not the most productive, not most impressive, but the most true. And just let whatever answer comes. Don't try to force it. Might even be a surprise to you as it arrives. And then ask, what is one small aligned step I already know I need to take? And just listen to that. What do you think disconnects people from themselves the most right now? Just think about that. You can always throw an answer in. I know for myself, it's often a pressure place. So, wood element, it's often this expansive energy of feeling like I need to be creating and doing the next thing. I have these visions and these ideas, and it'll pull me so far out that it can be difficult for me to be present. And so I make it such an active practice every single day to come into presence so that I can not only presence when I'm in a session with a client or with friends, when I'm having a conversation, but can I be present with myself? What do I need to do right now? Not just the checklist. So what do you think disconnects people the most? And I would say for myself, the thing that will disconnect me the fastest would actually tend to be things like social media. Seeing what other people are doing, or just getting caught into the endless scrolling, seeing what is going on. And then the funny thing is if somebody else is doing something that I had planned to do, maybe it's something I'd planned to create, I will stop in my tracks because I have this whole thing of copying people. And so I've had to really work at learning what my coach would say is confirmation bias. So, that's just confirmation that what you're doing is something that's important, and it's valuable and it's viable right now. So that will often do that to me. So this sense of comparison. It's just thinking about that for yourself. My other question for you is, which stress pattern do you resonate with the most? Is it pressure, overthinking, overstimulation, perfectionism, or is it fear? If it feels safe to do so, you can go ahead and stick that in the comments. So again, you can see it even in what I was saying for myself, it's pressure. Pressure tends to be the thing that will be my stress pattern for sure. So just thinking about this. When we are, so often we think we need to burn our lives to the ground to create our purpose. We need to quit our job, we need to leave our relationship, we need to move, all sorts of things that people will do. And we don't realize that we are always recreating what's within us. And so pressure, yeah, okay, perfect. And when we all of a sudden come into this quietness and we can still the pressure, whether that's through meditation, yoga. I've been doing a lot of Tai Chi and Qigong right now. I kind of committed to myself that I was going to do that daily for this year and see how that works with my nervous system instead of only pushing. And again, pressure. So for myself, I was doing a lot of the last year, I was doing a lot of strength training. And it's not that I'm not strength training anymore. I still am. And I still, a little more cardio back into my life, but also doing a Qigong practice and a Tai Chi practice to kind of give me some balance. And so with the flexibility of mind and body, so that became something that was really important for me this year, was realizing that the strength training was almost another type of pressure that wasn't actually serving me fully. And so I needed to try and find a way to harmonize instead of force. So catching myself when I was getting pulled into that pattern or behavior again. So just noticing what's there. And so when we're coming into purpose, we don't have to burn our lives to the ground. Our purpose is how we show up in this world. It is in every single conversation that we have. It is in every interaction. We can change somebody's life with a smile, with a kind word, with a true word in this moment. Maybe it's exactly what somebody needed to hear to kind of shake them out of just keeping on the same line. And so it's how we show up. It's the way that we do our life. As long as it's in service to who we are walking in our purpose. Because our careers can change multiple times. I've had 5 or 4, 1, 2, 3, I have to think here now, 4, I'm on my 5th full career. So, we can change those, that's fine, as long as it's in service. And it's not because we're chasing or trying to find fulfillment, because the fulfillment actually needs to come in with how we show up, not what we're doing when we show up. And so I always remember that the person that changed my life, or my son's life, or had the greatest impact on my son's life in high school, was the janitor of Highland. And it always blew me away. But he always had time. He always spoke to the students. He heard them. He saw them. He made them feel like they had value. And I remember us having a really big conversation about that, about how many lives that one person has saved. And it's not that there's not value to the principal and the vice principal and the counselors and the teachers, but I was fascinated that the person that had the greatest impact on him in high school was the janitor. And so we often think we need to do these certain types of jobs or have these certain roles in life. And it's not that. It's how we show up in the role that we're in at this moment. So no matter what we're doing, how am I showing up? So what am I doing? That doing is in service to who I am, not just in it to what I am. Okay. So your takeaway on this, we want to stop trying to figure out the entire purpose and instead ask, what helps me feel more like myself? What helps me feel more like myself? And that question begins the return. When I was asked the question what I loved most about my lighting career in my day, it was when people would come with an issue with their lights, with the whole building process within their marriage. It would be fascinating. And the opportunity to talk them through it. And when they would leave the lighting showroom, they would be holding hands and they would jokingly ask me what they owed me for the marriage counseling session. And so I can look back and see why coaching was the path that I was told to walk. Because what filled me up the most was helping people kind of get out of all the noise and chaos and get back to the important things. Come back to each other, come back to this moment. Who cares what your mother-in-law is going to love? What chandelier she likes? What feeling do you want in your home? And it was like the more I could guide people back to themselves, the fuller my cup got. It wasn't about making a sale. It wasn't about anything else. It was about helping people remember who they are. And so then all of a sudden in that stillness, in my case, it was forced stillness, which I don't recommend, but is highly effective. This is the place that it really came through for me. And so as we ask that question, we can start getting some deeper answers. And the reminder here for you is you are not broken. You are not failing and you are not lost. You are likely exhausted, overstimulated, over-identified with survival, and disconnected from your own inner signals. And so that's the place that we want to go into. Purpose is not something you force. It's something that emerges when the noise quiets enough for the truth to be heard again. It's already within you. All right, you guys. I hope you have an amazing day. And I would love to hear more from you guys. So if there's any questions, anything that you want, please let me know. I just created a new assessment. So we called it, what did we call it? I'll remember the name shortly. The 5-element alignment assessment. So if you want to know what your element is, I can send that over to you. I will put it in here and then we'll also be able to, if you message me, then I can also send you the links of like describing what those elements are so that we can understand ourselves. It's the oldest psychological assessments coming into the 5 elements. So we'll start with there. All right, you guys, have an amazing day. Mwah. Love you. I will definitely send it to you, Bobby. All right. Bye, guys. See you soon.